We'll get started here. Tuesday, September 30th. Our special meeting on the budget, and it is 7 p.m., so we can start. Can we have a roll call, please, Madam City Clerk?
John Harabedian, Mayor.
Here.
John Caposcia, Mayor Pro Tem.
Here.
Council members Rachel Arizmendi.
Here.
Denise Delmar.
Here.
And Jean Goss.
Here.
How about an approval of the agenda? Looks okay to everyone?
Yes. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we will go to public comment for items not on the agenda.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions that have been unanswered, and I'd like to see if I could address those at this time. I provided 7 public records requests. I have not been provided with the questions that I've asked. The first public records request that I had given City Hall was on July 22nd. The second one was July 24th. It's over 60 days, and I'd still like the answer to all my questions that I ask as a taxpayer, as a citizen, as a resident, number one. Number two, I believe it was September 2013, I could be wrong on the date, the city council voted that the city would purchase water from the city of Arcadia. At the time when our wells were dry, Bruce Emmons stated that our water wells, our motors were sucking air. I'd like to know how it was possible for City Hall to override the city's council's request to buy the water from Arcadia and take delivery of the yellow MWD water. I think that's a fair question to ask. Does the City Hall have the right to override the City Council's vote? And if they do, I'd like to know how that's possible, and if it is, why do we have a City Council? Number 3, I asked the City Hall in the form of a public records request. I'd like verification on how the city spent the $3.5 million of the CAR money from 2012, I believe, when the CAR was terminated. I've asked for copies of the invoices. I've asked copies for the city checks. I'd like to see proof that the city spent the CRA's money. If they didn't spend the CRA's money, I'd like to see proof that it was returned to the state of California. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if there's no, we'll wait for other public comment, and then we can answer those questions.
Good evening, Mayor Harabedian and council members. I owe an apology to council members Delmar and Arizmendi. At the last council meeting, I expressed my concern over the reorganization plan that they presented. I was afraid that the initial increase in cost was ill-timed, and I had trouble understanding the plan. That was my shortcoming, not the fault of those who wrote it. It has since been pointed out to me that the efficiencies, staff structural changes, and the wage and benefit caps would result in much-needed long-term savings to the city. Because we face future deficits, I would think that even though these deficits may have been overstated, now would be a very good time to institute their plan, which is designed to control future costs. There are provisions that could be modified, such as pegging payroll to market rates, since market rates could go crazy, but that would not be hard to protect against. So I hope that this council will reconsider the reorganization plan, looking at the long-term benefits and not just the initial effect as I did. Again, I apologize to members Delmar and Arizmendi for not being able to see the positive long-term advantages of their plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other public comment? And we'll bring it back, Madam City Manager, to the 3 questions. We can answer number 2 I think from, just as the Mayor Pro Tem and we never authorized the city to purchase water from Arcadia. You know, we'd always authorized the purchase to go directly to MWD. So I can answer number two. Number 1 and 3, in terms of Mr. Ritchie's public records requests, where do we stand?
Number one, the 7 public records requests submitted in July, all of those have been responded to, and Mr. Ritchie did come in and pick up and pay for those copies. He has them, he paid for them, he took them with him. For item number 3, Mr. Ritchie was sent a letter informing him that the documents would be available after October 6th, because it is a large, it's a lot of pages, and it will be ready on time, anytime after April 6th. And he was sent a letter informing him of such.
Okay. And Earl, to the extent that you didn't think that your previous public records requests weren't answered, does it make sense to come in and maybe talk with our staff about that? I mean, there's only so much we can do here, but.
I believe that Elaine chose to answer what she chose, not the entire questions that I asked.
Okay. Okay.
There was the other one about the CRA.
That was number 3.
That was the third one, which is going to be
After
forthcoming.
October 6th.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Also, it's my understanding.
Earl, you can come to the podium again.
It was my understanding when we all gathered at the city council in this room, that the city council took a vote and they voted to buy the water from the city of Arcadia.
We never.
That was before you were elected or you were on the city council.
That would have been when we were on the council, and I think it was October 2013, I believe, when we authorized the city to purchase from MWD. I don't know the exact date. I'm looking at our director.
Could we take a look or I'll take a look? I can go through the records and let's find out what the city voted on regarding the purchase of the water.
Absolutely. We definitely can.
And then if the city council did vote on taking delivery of the water from Arcadia, I'd like to know how you guys got overrode.
Okay.
I think that's a fair question.
It is.
And I would just like to add that all of our minutes and agendas, you're aware, are online going back
It's
5
fine.
years.
And we can verify that.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. And we'll move on to the one item that's on the agenda tonight. And it looks like there's going to be a presentation.
We have actually I have a short presentation this evening. It's only 8 slides, so it'll take a few seconds for us to get everything started up. I don't want to press the wrong button, Bruce. It's this one. There we go. Nope, I don't want to power off. No, I don't want to power off.
You also need to clean your filter.
Yeah, I clean our filter. Make that go away.
I'd like to. Doesn't want to go away. I guess we're just not going to watch this tonight. Where's the? I'll get right on that. Let me get out the step ladder. It should just go away by itself here.
Should go away by itself. Let's just advance. See if this is advancing now. You might need to reboot. Technology is wonderful.
Are there copies of this in the back?
There's one, might be a few, but probably not enough for the entire audience.
Okay.
And it would be good for the folks at home to be able to follow along with us. There we go. And then make that go away. Gave us another box.
Just need to click over on that little.
On that corner over there. You might need to do it from the computer, Bruce, to make it go away. With the mouse.
Yeah, mouse.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Just a quick, oh, that's gonna keep popping up, Director Inman, if you could keep making that go away.
I'll sit over here.
He'll sit over there and make that keep going away. What has brought us to this evening is, in May and June, the council, on your regular agendas, discussed and provided direction. We were able to finalize our estimates for fiscal year 13-14, which just ended on June 30th, 2014. As you're all aware, the audit is currently underway, and it's estimated to be completed on time just after the beginning of the new calendar year. Then in July, the City Council received a more detailed budget presentation regarding our current fiscal year budget, which is the 14-15 budget, which would cover the period of July 1, 2014 through June 30th, 2015. The council received information regarding personnel staffing, our contracts, consultants, and also reviewed staff's itemized list of what 10% budget reductions would look like. In the end, the council authorized the staff to open up the new fiscal year with the budget as presented at that meeting, with direction to bring it back to the council in a special meeting where this budget would be the only topic of the night, and that's what brings us here to tonight's meeting. As a refresher, the current fiscal year budget is balanced. In fact, it's projecting a surplus of a little over $200,000. Our concerns are the next two fiscal years, which begin fiscal year ending 2016 and fiscal year ending 2017, which is when our utility users tax begins to sunset or decrease. We're projecting about a $231,000 at this point in fiscal year 16 deficit, and a $730,000 deficit in fiscal year 2017. I want to point out that the cover staff report for this evening, the report dated September 23rd, on page 3, accidentally picked up the previous projections from before. As you're aware, in May we revised our revenue estimates. So disregard the chart on page 3 of the cover report. These are the correct numbers. These are the numbers that are shown in the July 22nd staff report. They match. There's a couple of things happening. First of all, we have these sort of competing factors occurring on the revenue side. We have our property taxes. We're projecting them to increase by about $357,000 between fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 17, but that is sort of offset by the UUT, which is projected to decrease by $829,000. I'd like to remind everyone, each 2% is about $500,000, but because there are some increases in the utility tax because of rate increases, that's the difference you're seeing between why this isn't $1 million, why it's an $828,000 decrease instead of the $1 million increase. There's just an inflation factor in the UUT. Then we have the loss of a number of one-time revenues we received in fiscal year 2014, one-time general fund revenues that are not going to carry over into fiscal year 16 and 17. The three big items, $266,000 related to the dissolution of our redevelopment agency. There was $110,000 franchise payment from Athens for the contract extension for our refuse contract. And then there was a $45,000 increase in our zoning and development fees related to the planning department because of the Kensington project. And of course, we're not going to have another one of those. So we had to back those one-time revenue increases out of the budget. That is why, if you look, you'll see that our total general fund revenues are actually down from the current fiscal year for those. Those are the big items. On the expenditure side, I want to remind the council, these numbers here are general fund expenses of $8.2 million and $8.5 million. We have not prepared the new budget estimates for the next two fiscal years. We do a biannual budget. We have good numbers for expenditures for the current fiscal year. It's not until we prepare the next biannual budget that we will have really accurate numbers for the next two fiscal years. What we did was a straight line CPI increase to come up with estimates, so we would have a starting point for discussions. I can tell you now that Those estimates do not include, we're aware of some major cost increases coming up in fiscal year 16 and 17, one of them being our NPDES, which is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System costs, which we funded with general fund reserves for the current fiscal year. Next fiscal year, staff, when we put a budget together, we'll be showing those costs, $200,000 to $400,000 in the general fund. We also have the successor agency administrative costs. Those are about $200,000. We currently receive reimbursement. You can kind of think of it as our old redevelopment agency money coming back to us to fund administrative overhead, to dissolve our old community redevelopment agency. Eventually those costs, the $200,000 in revenue will go away, but we'll still have the costs. The costs that are being borne by that are pieces of the staff that is dissolving the agency, which is the city manager, the finance director, and development services staff. So there's some big ticket items that we're expecting to occur in 16 and 17 that aren't reflected in these numbers yet. I want to emphasize that. Property taxes. I want to spend a few moments zeroing in on our property taxes. This is an update as of today. These are actuals, 2012 actual, 2013, 2014. This is what we estimated when we put the final budget together that you reviewed in May. 2014, this is where we're actually going to come in at for property taxes. These are unaudited numbers, they're preliminary numbers. I'll explain that in a bit more. Our auditor's currently working on completing the audit. So we were only off, it's $3,762,000 versus $3,766,000. We were pretty close. You don't get much closer than that in your revenue estimates. And then here's what's proposed in the document that's attached to your agenda. We're estimating our property taxes will increase to 3.99, 4.1 million, and 4.2 million as we go out into future fiscal years. I want to show you that the property tax detail, this property tax number is actually composed of what you would think of as your property taxes, the bill you get in December and April that we all pay. There's the property tax number, and then there's always adjustments for penalties and interest and prior year adjustments. There's always some money the city, and for the city of Sierra Madre, this has always been historically a positive number. And then we have, you may be familiar if you bought a house recently, the property transfer tax, which is these two numbers here are actual of $77,000. So you add these three numbers up, you get to the $3,766,000, which you see matches this number up above. That's where the final, so the property tax number is actually composed of a number of things. What I want us to concentrate on, going into the new fiscal year, property taxes are estimated at $3.7 million, which is a nice healthy increase. We don't have any way of knowing what the penalties, interest, and prior year adjustments are going to be, or what the transfer tax is going to be. We've assumed a 25% increase from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, because we're all aware that there's a lot of property changing hands out there, and that's assessed, I believe it's 55 cents per $1,000 on the transaction. This number here is the current number, and I'll go on to two slides next that show where we get the 3.7 million, which is our basic property tax number. We actually contract with its HDL company to monitor our property taxes and our sales taxes, and they are the experts in the field of property taxes and understanding how property taxes work. I requested a spreadsheet from them to explain how this calculation works. We get a lot of questions about, Elaine, all of these houses that were previously on the rolls for $300,000 are now selling for $1 million. Who gets all that increase in revenue? This is the calculation, how it's actually done. I apologize. I actually split it on 2 pages to try to make it a little bigger. This is in billions. It's 1.6 billion, our current real property value. Then you have our consumer price index. You might have heard, you're all familiar, Prop 218 allows a 2% increase unless the CPI increase was less than 2%. You were all notified in May that the tax assessors has informed us that it's actually almost a 0.5%. It's 0.45%. So we get a CPI increase on all the non-Prop 8. Prop 8 are the parcels where somebody purchased the property and since then values have dropped. So they're allowed to get a temporary decrease in the assessment to save some money on their property tax bill. So here's our CPI increase of only a 0.5%. Here is where transfer of ownership, assessed value change. We're estimating $46 million increase in all the property that is going to change hands in Sierra Madre this new year. 46 million total. There's an estimate for people can still appeal their property tax values. There's an estimate in here. This is based upon the appeals that are pending. And if they don't come out in our favor, it's a reduction. That's money that we don't receive. And then this number here is, you're also familiar from May, the county tax assessor has reversed a great deal. I'd estimate 75% of the Prop 8 reductions have been reversed. So these property taxes are no longer being reduced to a down market rate. They're starting to come back up to market value. So those monies get returned to the city. We always explain that's a temporary reduction. A lot of people didn't realize when they saw this Prop 8 reduction on their tax bill that at some point in time it was going to bounce up to what the assessed value should be. So if you add up these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, our total estimated assessed value in the city is about $1.7 billion. Add in our base year values. This is from our old redevelopment agency. Remember, it went away, so we get property taxes on that now. Then an estimate for the secured and unsecured property tax roll. That's basically fixtures and equipment that businesses have to get our new total estimated assessed value of $1.728 billion. And up here, again, this is where the question of where does all that money go when properties transfer. You can see we've estimated $46 million of those to get down to our total of 1.728 as being our new total assessed value. Remember that number, 1.728 billion. The next part of the calculation here, I carried it to this page so you wouldn't have to remember. Here's our new total assessed value of 1.782 billion. Properties are taxed at 1%. So you take 1% of the 17.28 billion and you get $17,288,000. The city gets on average, you've heard this before, we don't get dollar for dollar of property taxes. We get on average about 22 cents on the dollar. So here's our share of the 17 million is 3.75 million. That's the city of Sierra Madre's share. There are still some outstanding appeals about only 23,000, so it's small. There's an estimated outstanding appeals, which gets us to our new property tax estimate of $3,734,000. And if you go back to this sheet, you'll see the $3,734 has been dropped in here. You add in the penalties and interest estimate, the transfer tax estimate. Our new revised estimate should be about $3,937,000. It's currently in our budget for $3,991,000. So our current budget is a little bit optimistic. I can tell you that historically, Hindenlighter de Lamas, they're conservative estimators. The last thing they want to do is give an estimate that is overly optimistic. The city uses it in their budget document, and they find themselves in a deficit position at the end of the year because revenues were estimated. My professional opinion, and I did consult with our interim finance director, I feel comfortable staying with the $3.91 million because we do perform better than the countywide averages as far as property taxes go. Our housing holds its value. It appreciates more than LA County in general. So I do think we're going to beat the estimate. But I do want to point out, in case I'm wrong, it could be as low as 3.9 3.7 million as opposed to 3.3991. So there's a difference there of about $60,000. I include these numbers down at the bottom. These were HDL's estimates back in May. I show this because it is a bit of a moving target. It depends on the property tax payments we receive. HDL is constantly updating their records for properties that change hands to come up with that estimate of what the new assessed value is going to be for the properties that change hands. So depending on when you ask them to do this analysis, it'll go up or down. We're not that far off currently from May to September, but it's just an example that it is a bit of a moving target. I always say estimating revenues is really more of an art than a science. We try to do the best we can to base our estimates on facts, but you're predicting into the future. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But all of this is meant to say, I think the estimates that are included in the budget document are optimistic. Definitely don't understate our revenues and maybe slightly overstating them. Here's the two spreadsheets. This is another thing we look at when we do our property tax assessments. You can see this is a history from 2014 to 2014, which is our estimate. I call it a pre-audit number. You'll see the 3766 number. That hasn't changed. For this entire period of time, from fiscal year 2004 to fiscal year 2014, which is the last year that we have pretty accurate data on, we've increased about $557,000, and which is about a 17% increase over that period of time, which on an average basis is about a 2.4% average, if you were just do a straight line average each year for that period from 2004 to 2014. Then I'm showing if you have an average of about 2.4% over this period of time for 2015 and 2016, the estimates have been bumped up because, recognition, our housing prices are increasing. The increase over this period of time is $357,000, which is 9.4%, or about 4.7% average percentage increase, which is double, just about double, what our historical average is. So this is just additional information to help the council become familiar with the methods we use to calculate what our property tax revenues are going to be. I know that was a lot of numbers and a lot of explaining. I can pause here for a second if there's anything you want me to go back and review.
The question I have is, so with the projected gap, with the 231,000 for fiscal year end 2016 and the 730,000 gap for 2017, does that include the projected increase in property taxes?
It includes these numbers, yes.
Okay, thanks.
When you put together the estimate for 2014, why wasn't the transfer tax and penalties and interest included in that, or why was it embedded in the estimate instead of shown separately?
I just didn't break it out, Mayor Pro Tem. There should be numbers here, I just didn't break them out. I wanted to get the going forward information done.
Okay.
I didn't do the research to pull these, but it would look the same. There'd be a number in this line and then an estimate for penalties and transfer tax. I just didn't pull it out. There should be numbers there, they're just not pulled out.
Right, okay, so do you know remember what HDL had predicted for fiscal year 2014? I'm just curious as to whether it came in higher than what they projected, just same like for 2015, which
2014 is a strange year because, as you recall, no one knew that the county tax assessors was going to restore the Prop 8 adjustments. That was about a $250,000 bump that no one was anticipating. So 2014 is a little odd. If I go back to the original estimate they gave us when we were starting the last fiscal year, it was probably about $300,000 less than what we finally came in at.
because of that
But
one time.
250,000 was that one-time bump from the Prop 8 adjustments.
Are all the Prop 8 adjustments done, or we
No.
could still be getting some of that?
We could still be getting some of that. The preliminary estimates, because the assessor's office doesn't share all of it, preliminarily, the experts are saying we've gotten 65-70% of it already. There's another 30% yet to be restored.
Are the Prop 8 adjustments embedded into 2015 numbers? Because it would seem to me that the way property prices have gone up, that'll, at the end of 2015, that'll be the end of the Prop 8 adjustments.
There are estimates of restoring it. That was this sheet I was showing here. They estimate, going to 2015,
Okay.
they're estimating we're going to get $46 million of it
I
back.
see. Okay, good, so it is embedded in
Yes.
there. Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
One other question. On slide 3, when you were talking about the known cost increases for fiscal year 2015 with NPDES and successor agency, did I hear you say about $200,000 to $400,000?
The MPDS at this point is estimated in the $200,000 to $400,000 range. We're currently, we haven't put the budget together yet. Rough estimate, minimum of 2, maximum of 400. And then the successor agency is 195,000. That's the exact number today.
195?
Just remind me what that is,
Which one?
the NPDES?
That's all the stormwater discharge stuff that we need to do, the additional monitoring of our.
And that's gonna come out of
storm-
general fund and not out of water?
Correct.
Okay.
Just a point on that, because I was reminded that we throw these acronyms out there and the public doesn't know, but it stands for National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. So I'm gonna try to be really careful to define the acronyms for the benefit of the audience.
Yes. And
Can
you
I-
can even simplify it. It's a stormwater runoff.
Yeah. Can I just follow up on that a little bit? Because we pulled it out of the sewer rates, that is taken into consideration, did you say, for the 200 to 400,000 estimate?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the administrative costs, I mean, I understand what you're saying about that, but I don't see that as an increase in cost. You're really not gonna spend extra money for that. And if for all of a sudden you were not doing any work anymore on it, you're not gonna lay off $200,000 worth of FTE, full-time equivalent employees, right?
That's correct.
So I wouldn't.
But it is, it affects the general fund. Probably the simplest way I can explain it is to give you an example. Let's say you have an employee, round number, $100,000 employee. Right now, 50,000 is going into the general fund. 50,000 is being paid by
Okay.
the admin. Once the admin goes away, the whole 100,000 has to
I
go into
see,
the general
I see.
fund.
I got it. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Question. My understanding was the NPDES, these estimates of 200 to 400,000 could be very conservative. Is that true? Couldn't it be a lot more than that?
Not in 2016, 2017. As we get out into the future years, depending on what the various analysis and studies, if we're constructing some system that cleans up the stormwater, that could be in the millions of dollars.
But there is some
But
uncertainty
there's-
about that, isn't there?
There's some uncertainty about what the costs are when you get out more than, the next 2 years are finishing reports and starting to do some monitoring of the outflows. After that, we may have to, once we do the studies, we may have to construct something to clean it up further.
There's one more point on that. I mean, the plan that Analyst Carlson is working on with the communities that we've partnered with has to be approved. So they've got a plan that they're working on, the consultant's working on, but we don't know if the powers that be are going to approve that plan. They may come back and say, this is not helping enough, you need to build more.
And up go the cost.
Yeah, so that's a possibility, and that's the problem with a lot of people that have been studying this are saying that it's almost like we're being held hostage, so to speak. In other words, if you spend enough money in capital, you get quote-unquote safe harbor where you won't be sued by the environmentalists.
And there might be a push actually too, which would be nice for us to actually unwind and actually reduce some of the requirements of the water permit, which they're now looking at on the
Yes.
federal level. So, I mean, fingers crossed we could get some relief there, but I wouldn't hold my breath,
It's
so,
uncertain.
yeah.
So going back to this amount that's not included, was there a reason it wasn't included in our projections as we're looking at budget gaps and as we're looking at the upcoming years? Should we
Because we-
include that in?
Because we've not prepared the next biannual budget yet. There's gonna be some line items that may go down. The council has been very aggressive in doing things like paying down our OPEB, other post-employment retirement benefits. You know, to state what acronyms are, we've paid off a big chunk of our JPA-IA liability. So there's some areas, there'll be increases, there'll be decreases. Until we sit down to do the actual line item budget, I don't know, I couldn't tell you how close we are to these numbers.
Well, one more point, can I make
Uh-huh.
a point on that? And again, we just removed a chunk of that right before you were elected with the new water and sewer rates, or the sewer rates. The council unanimously felt that that was inappropriate to be funding some of that from the sewer rates. So we took that out and we threw it out into this nebulous general fund that it wasn't there projected before. So I think we did the right thing, you know, I mean, we could have gotten away with embedding that into the sewer rate, but none of us felt that was the right thing to do.
And it should be pointed out, Mayor Pro Tem Capocha, that that resulted in the sewer rates not increasing by as much. Water rates were going up by a significant amount. For sewer rates to also have gone up by a significant amount. We would have had both, so by pulling that out, our sewer rate increase was nominal.
Did I understand correctly, we have a consultant who's helping with all of this?
Yes.
And the consultant doesn't have any estimate of what the cost is going to be
Cost for what?
to implement this?
The NPD.
MPDS.
No, we don't have a consultant helping us with the cost yet, the total cost. We are the members of a 4 or 5 city consortium, Monrovia, Arcadia, quite a few cities. The one number I know for sure right now, for the next stage of the plan, there's a $100,000 contribution we make to I don't remember the total amount, I'd be guessing a $7 million project that needs to happen next.
And what is that
Um,
project?
That is it'll be coming to you at the second meeting in October. I don't know the details of it, but it's to do the preliminary testing of the outflows
Okay.
at different areas. We need to test what is getting into the sewers. That's
That's
a
just
very
for the test.
simplistic way to explain it.
And this is all for really water permits, right?
This
I mean,
is
it's the simple,
federal stormwater permits. Mhm.
okay.
And this consultant is developing what is
Well,
it?
I just heard.
Right now, the consultant's developing our monitoring plan.
Okay.
Because first you have to test
So
to
we
see
do have
what's
a
in the
consultant,
water.
right?
We're a member of this 5-city consortium.
Okay.
He's working for us and the other cities in the
Okay, so
consortium.
there is a consultant.
And then there's a cost share. And the good news is it's population and city square miles base. So we get a small share, it sounds like a big number. We get a small share compared to the Arcadias and the other big cities participating. It's proportioned out based on population and square miles. So right now, the consultant is working with all the cities to develop the joint monitoring project.
Okay, so my question was,
Mm-hmm.
does this consultant have any idea what the cost would be for the monitoring system, an estimate?
That's coming to you yes.
So that's the one that's
coming to
coming-
you the second meeting in October, and I
That we're-
don't have those
okay.
numbers memorized. I remember our share being about 100,000, but I don't remember the details, how it was split up.
Okay.
And City Manager, you have one more slide that you want
Yes.
to finish, and then we can jump back into questions?
This is the last slide. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to get direction from the council regarding how to proceed regarding the reduction in the city's utility users tax. Our current fiscal year budget is balanced. Council hasn't given staff direction on whether or not, it's a timing matter. Do we start reductions this fiscal year? Do we leave this fiscal year alone because it's balanced? And do our reductions in 16 and 17? Moving forward to 16 and 17, there's basically 2 ways to balance a city budget. One of them is its expenditures or its revenues. On the expenditure side, service level reductions, which services to save money, alternative service provision, which services might the council be interested in seeing whether or not they could be contracted out, and if there'd be a cost saving by contracting a service out, which service. I always hate to mention the revenue side of things, but it is part of the equation. As you're aware, we don't currently do a full 100% cost recovery on our fees. Fee studies always establish the cap, the max, and council can set anything between 0 and the max. Most of our fees are not at full cost recovery. And then, evaluating possible new revenue sources. And then lastly is direction regarding the new biannual budget. It is staff's recommendation that we do start working on the details, that we start in October, hopefully to have a draft with you we'll work on it October, November, December, January. It's about a 4-month process to be able to return the very beginning of the year, February, March, with a draft budget so you can see what the numbers would look like. But we would need, in order to put that document together, we need to have some direction on the items that are in the bullet above. Service level reductions, revenues, whatever other recommendations the council would like to give staff. That concludes my presentation. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. And there's a lot here. We've seen this staff report a couple times now, and there's been some updates, but there's still a lot of information here, and I'll open up to questions from the council to the extent that you guys haven't asked them already, but feel free to shoot on, yes.
And I thought this might be helpful because I haven't been here 1,000 years like you all have. And there's a lot of people that are new to our community. And in going through this, there's a big piece that I'm missing, and I think a lot of people. The UUT hasn't been around for a lot of years. So my question is, when did it come to be? And it had a sunset on it. And why was that sunset put on there? And why haven't we been working towards that sunset? So my first question is, when did it come to be? Why did we decide that we needed a UUT? And if there was a sunset, in my mind, I keep thinking if we knew that there was a sunset, that we shouldn't be using that extra percentage for salaries and for vital programs. So in my mind, I'm thinking that must have been used for just a one-time fee. So, and I can't find it anywhere in the budget, and I keep looking back, so I know I'm totally missing something. So maybe one of you guys can explain it to me, or someone on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good.
The UU.
Did you want to know too, Rochelle? See?
Okay.
Good.
All right, well, because, I was here, I voted on it.
You've been here 1,000 years, right?
Except let me go back to old history. The UUT,
the first one,
the
yeah.
UUT predates the 1990s. The city has had a utility users tax since before the 1990s. It was about 6%. I think it was 6% when it was first put in place.
In
But it was
1990s?
no, I don't know the exact year. I know
Well,
pre-1990s.
John's been here since then.
No, I don't remember when the first UUT, I was gonna start with
When the
the,
first UUT was implemented, I think it was at 2%. I think it was actually really, really low, and then in 1996, they bumped it up to 6%. 6%, right? I think.
It's
Yeah,
6%,
6.
I don't know.
So,
History predates me, but I know it's old. We've had a utility users tax for many years.
Okay.
and of course, the reason for it was because of Proposition 13, capping or limiting the amount of revenue. And, that changed everything too, because before, my understanding, before Proposition 13, the council would set the budget and you would be taxed to match that budget. That's how it was done. So, okay, so it's a more difficult world that we live in. I did a lot of work on this during the election. Also going back to the 2010 election when I was elected. Okay.
Go back to my question.
Okay, but it was put in basically for two reasons, and this one went in 2008.
Right.
And it was put into, first of all, it was an alternative to another ballot measure that was proposed by the police department, or the police.
POA,
The
the Police
POA, the union,
Association.
the association, which was going to tie salaries to the average in the San Gabriel Valley. And I don't really know all the details of that. So an agreement was reached with the council to put an alternative measure to give the police department and I'll say it, and I believe in it, much-needed raises. So Measure UUT in 2008 gave our sworn police officers raises in consecutive years of 9%, 8%, and 7%. It also funded the paramedic program, which was just getting started. The seed money for the paramedic program came from selling the Canyon Firehouse. But it was understood at that time that that was not sufficient to sustain the program going forward. And today we subsidize out of the general fund the paramedic program by about, what, $500,000 a year?
Correct.
Okay. Now, again, I just want to point out that at that time, in 2008, I'm pointing out that we had followed a succession of good property tax years leading up to 2008. So in spite of the property tax growing at a pretty fast rate back then, because I looked at all these numbers, I can kick those out as needed. But at that time, the community felt that it was important to do this for the police. Otherwise, we were going to have to pay even a higher rate to tie it to averages in the San Gabriel Valley. So I do want to point out again, that at that time, that was approved by 62% of the voters.
What was the, okay,
Well, let me just make a couple more points about
but
it.
in 2006, wasn't it
No.
6%?
Oh, 2006, it was
Up until
6%.
2008.
Right. so-
April of 2008, it went to,
Okay, so,
Yeah,
okay, and
and
then,
this measure-
then it went to 10%,
Right.
okay.
Went to 8, then 10.
Okay,
Okay, then it stopped at 10, and I'll get to that in a second. But I do want to point out, too, that, you know, this was unanimously supported by the council. That was Enid Jaffe, Joe Mosca, Buchanan, Don Watts, and Kurt Zimmerman all supported this at the time, and so it passed by just about 2/3 of the voters. Okay, so as City Manager Aguilar just said, it ramped up over the years. Then what happened is, this is just my opinion now, I'm going to speculate. These are facts, but I'll give you an opinion. What happened is that this was at the time of the telecom boom, when everybody couldn't consume cell phones fast enough. And the cell phone revenue, or the telecommunications revenue, and I can show you all this on graphs, but the telecommunications revenue shot up tremendously. So now the UUT brought in more money than was forecasted. So the council at the time, and I don't remember the exact who was on it, they said, whoa, this is coming in pretty hot and heavy. We should keep it at 10% for now. So they did. They did the right thing. Instead of, taking advantage of the windfall, they capped it. And I do want to point out again, because of the advisory measure UA, we've had a committee every year look at whether the utility tax went to the purposes for which it was advertised on the ballot, which is public safety. So every year, the Citizens Committee, working with the finance director and the treasurer, has come back and verified that the increases in the money that we've spent on public safety have been less than the increment,
No,
or
more.
been greater than the incremental tax revenue that we got from Measure U. Measure U. So I just want to point that out. So my point about this is, because the council has been so conservative in their spending, that difference between what came in with this tax and what we've spent on the police department was money that could not be spent on trees, on streets, on the library, on parks and recreation. Our council, working with the city manager, continued to chop down expenses in all those areas to give the extra money to public safety. So that's where we're at.
okay, but you didn't answer my
Oh,
question.
the sunset
Yeah,
clause,
that's the
okay.
big thing.
Yeah,
Because the budget hasn't gone down to that 6%.
I can only speculate on the reason for that. You might have to talk to
I was
Mosca.
here.
Okay, so what was the thinking on the sunset
in
clause?
2008, the thinking on the sunset clause was entirely for accountability. The council at the time wanted to make sure that the voters had an opportunity, that this wasn't locked in forever, that the voters had an opportunity to tell their government again, yes, We see that the increase has gone to public safety, yes, we'll continue that increase. So it was entirely done just for accountability, a check-in point with the voters again, to make sure that this was still something that the voters were in favor of. It was entirely for accountability.
I want to can I point out something? I just, on my own position on it, because when we started in the last council.
No, I don't think we need to do our own positions. I'm just really trying to get the
No,
facts.
I want to just point out a point.
Okay.
When we first were talking about putting the last ballot measure on the ballot, I was against the sunset clause, but I was talked back into it for the reason that the city manager just said, that I thought it was, if circumstances changed and property tax skyrocket, or our expenses decrease, because we're on a pretty good trend for some things that we've been paying heavily on, that, it's worth looking at instead of embedding high taxes from now till eternity. So, thank you for listening, by the way. I know you didn't want to hear that.
But my question still comes back to the budget never decreased towards that 6% or the 8%. So that's my big question. It never went down to that. So was there, in the thinking and in the city council thinking, was there always that, we're always going to go back to the voters and see what the voters wanted? Do they want to keep the 10%? Do they want to go to the 8%? And then if the voters say, no, we don't want to go to the 10%, then we're going to say, okay, well, we need to take action then. So
That's right.
was that the
That's
thinking?
correct.
Yep.
Okay. So the voters have said now twice, no, we don't, but I still can't see that decrease. So that's where
We're
kinda-
doing the decrease now essentially.
Okay,
We haven't had to decrease to this point because we've had the 10% through the end of this fiscal year. So
okay,
the decreases affect our next 2 fiscal year budgets.
okay. So we were just kind of hoping that the voters would say yes the last 2 times.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Put it that way.
well,
kind
when
of.
we were running, I think in 2010, I don't know what that council was thinking. I know, this time around, we thought we could convince the voters that the 10% rate going forward was a good investment for the community, and that the services they got for it were worth it. And, we lost.
Which could
And-
be.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, you're right. But we were pretty confident that we could convince the voters to extend the UT, and, it was close. But I do think that the council before us, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what was in their head when they were thinking about putting together that proposition, which,
And
had to
I'll
go
just
up to
tell you
12.
my take on all this is the city council has to be the fiscal responsibility. And fiscal responsibility means you're given a set of numbers and you need to work towards those numbers. And the set of numbers was, this is what we need to work towards. We could always go back to the public and say, hey, this is what it looks like it's going to be, at the end of 2017. Do you really want to see us there? But I never saw that. So that's where, now we're here where we are. So for me, it's more of an accountability to us right now. We are, we are the fiscal responsibilities, and so we
Sure.
need to do what we need to do. And I just wish it had started when it should have started.
and it's a good point. And
Could have,
we
should
can-
have, would have.
Right, and, it's a good transition to where we are today. And I remember back,
And thank you for the history, John. You did a
That was helpful.
fine job.
the last biennial budget, I know that we did talk about, budgeting for 10%, 8%, and 6%. And, we had a couple meetings where we saw the numbers, and we ended up going forward with the estimates that we did. But here we are today, and I think going forward, this is why we're here tonight, right? To talk about that question that, how do we get to 6%? Go
If I
ahead.
can make one more comment. Again, I feel that the council, the last 2 years, we've worked hard to try to minimize the expense, as you're suggesting. But I wasn't willing to go to a scorched earth scenario where we start shutting down services or immediately moving to contracting out.
What did you do? Just,
Well,
I mean, what is one of the, because what is one of the, I'm not being
yeah.
facetious at all, I really just
Yeah,
want to know.
for example, we chopped some of the roundabout services and used that money for street repair.
Okay.
For example.
And we're down,
The
we're down
biggest-
10
We're down 10 FTEs. The biggest thing
so-
we did about 3 fiscal years ago was a reorg, a different reorg, where people were laid off, and we saved about $250,000
We-
of
we-
general fund
We
monies.
reduced city hall hours, which of
That
course is not,
but-
but, you know,
The
we
big
tried.
cut was
Yeah.
the last reorg about 3 years
Yeah.
ago that saved about $200,000.
And then it was paying the, some of our debts and deferred liabilities off sooner so that we wouldn't.
Okay,
be
so
hit
the
with
reorg is,
interest.
so that's the biggie, when we lost how many?
The last reorg we lost, the total of 10 is over a couple of, it's in the charts.
Yeah.
The total of 10 is over, let me go to the chart, 5 or 6 fiscal years. Let's see here. That is in your attachment to your,
The last reorg, it was 6 FTEs that you cut?
that sounds about
6 or
right. The
7?
last reorg was about 6 FTEs.
And I think the big, to the Mayor Pro
But
Tem's
from
point.
Let me look.
fiscal year 9 to fiscal year 15, we've only lost 2.47 FTEs.
Right, I think what page is that chart? I think if you go a couple years, it's from 2009 to 2000?
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
did your
No,
fiscal year.
fiscal year 11-12, we were at 102,
Yeah,
and by 13-14, we're down to 88.
Right, and community services lost 9 of those,
Yeah, as a result.
right.
and the pool and.
Library lost, Public Works lost, PD lost, it's spread out all over.
Not really.
But we had, the
But
peak
my
was
point
102.
was though, from fiscal year 8, right, from when you put in the
Which was
UUT,
97.5,
right, to.
88.
I have 9507 down.
9507, that includes our elected and appointed. The numbers to compare is the 97.54 and the 88.07.
And
95 is if you include the
and the
council.
9.9 is our waterworks folks, right?
I don't know where you're seeing, I'm sorry, a 9.9.
That's our community services.
Community services goes from a peak of, in 2008-9 of 13, almost 14, down to 4.5.
So that's where the big chunk of your FTEs went, is there.
That's probably, yes, that's where the biggest chunk went, when we contracted out the pool.
Okay.
Yeah, and, go ahead. Yeah.
That same spring, that same council raised fees quite considerably. Isn't that correct? Or was that the following year?
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, it depends on how we
Because
define
fees
considerably,
went
we
way up.
did. We did increase fees.
Well, I wouldn't say they
yeah.
went way up, but they were raised, right?
They went up.
Yeah.
And we also, a couple other things, staff has gone without salary raises. We did.
Yeah,
we
I
did
know.
a bit of a COLA, as you guys saw. And then, we haven't filled positions in various departments, most notably the PD, and those have been left unfilled. So, look, we've done certain things. We haven't, as the Mayor Pro Tem said, we have not scorched the earth, and we have not started, aggressively cutting. That's for sure. But again, I think, fast forward to today, I think this is a tough job for us to do now, right? And maybe past councils could have done a little bit more work on that. Maybe we didn't do enough. I don't know. Hindsight being 20/20, but that leaves us all here at the dais with
And I think
a very
that's my
hard
point.
task.
I think my point is that there hasn't been a lot done, and
Yeah.
I know that we kind
Yeah.
of say that, but looking through it, really, the expenditures have remained about the same. Actually, some have gone up, and so, yeah, we do have a hard job to do right now.
We
And
do.
we're gonna have to do it, and
We do. Yeah.
we're not gonna be liked.
So, and then we'll get to discussion after we do questions. And are there any other questions before I open it up for public comment?
Just one. The deficit for 2016, 2017 is, you said, probably understated. Is that correct? You said it was understated?
Probably understated.
Probably understated. And so the scope of this problem is much bigger than I think we realize. There are a lot of imponderables here that we cannot really control at this point. And so I feel like, that just has to be said. We can't whittle around the edges and solve this budget problem. We're going to have to really hit some big issues.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why the July 22nd staff report, if you go back to that one, the recommended reductions were in the tune of 800 to $1 million,
Right.
because this 730 is understated.
I'll open up for public comment now, and, obviously we can ask questions after that, but public comment, questions on the budget?
Earl Ritchie, 134 Esperanza. I'd like to ask a simple question. And I think we've asked this before, and I mean, for somebody that sits in the audience, if you're people, you're a resident, most of the time we don't get any answers. But here's a simple question. If the city's truly trying to reduce expenditures, why hasn't the city fixed the water tunnels that we have that are in the mountain? If we fix the water tunnel in the mountain, we produce more water, and we also drill additional tunnels. We have free-flowing water that we don't have to pay for the electric pump to move the water out of the ground. And it might get us around the situation that we have where we have a common field-wide reservoir that we share between Arcadia and the city of Sierra Madre. By Sierra Madre failing to produce the water, we have nowhere to store it. It allows Arcadia to completely drain our reservoir. And it's our $3 a unit water that Arcadia is selling to their residents for $1 a unit. So my question is, why have we failed to fix the 2 tunnels that we have to try to have them to be commercial producing water sources for the benefit of this city, and also to drill some additional tunnels? We've been told time and time again as residents, we're going to raise the water rates. I don't have a problem with that. And the city council's also said we're going to fix the water infrastructure. So the water tunnels and the water wells are part of the water infrastructure. And if Arcadia can pump water out of our common shared reservoir, we should be able to do it too.
Thank you, and we'll answer that after the rest of the public has a chance to comment and ask questions.
This is more of a question, and probably show my ignorance, but in prior, excuse me, in prior discussions, there's been quite a point made about there's a general fund and there's other monies. And I don't know, because when they say, oh, well, that's not general fund, so there's something else, and so I'm not quite clear what that means, because I get the picture, well, it's not this pocket, it's probably this pocket. You say, okay, well, it's not general fund, so, but we'll pay someplace else, and so I don't know, maybe that's what my ignorance showing there. But when I hear that, say, oh, that's not general funds, we have to worry about that. But the money's coming from someplace, and so it seemed to me, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but when I hear that, okay, well, which pocket is it coming out from me? Because I'm paying for it. So as I say, that's one point that's unclear. When we're fixing this, are we downloading it to someplace else, or are we really, moving it over? So, oh, yeah, the general fund looks good, but there's other problem we got to worry about over here. So that's a concern I have, is that because it may not be there, but when I hear you guys talking, it sounds like it's quite specific. General funds, oh, that's a problem. Otherwise, it's not a problem. So I may misunderstand, but that's a concern I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Can answer that as well. It is. It's confusing. Any other questions or comments? So we'll bring it back to Mr. Ritchie's point. So the West Tunnel is operational, and we get about 10% of our water historically from that a year. The East Tunnel, I mean, we've looked at for years now, since we've been on council, about investing the capital into that project to make it operational. And, the big risk there is we don't know if we were to spend $200,000 on getting the East Tunnel operational, whether it's actually going to produce water like the West Tunnel does. The facts before us and the data that we have, it's questionable. We don't know if it's going to flow like the West Tunnel. So the West Tunnel is operational. We get a lot of water from there still. The East Tunnel, it hasn't been operational for a couple decades now. And we would have to invest a substantial amount of money to make it work, and we don't know if that would actually be worth the investment.
It's in our program.
Now it's in our program, and, we've set aside money to actually look at it, but I don't know how much money we set it, maybe a little north of 100,000.
Not even.
Yeah.
Just for this, we need a study.
The study,
just to
right.
determine.
So, I mean, I guess to your questions about the tunnel, the two east and west tunnels, on drilling more tunnels, again, that's a capital cost. We've gone to our water district to ask if we could get help there, on possibly drilling, a new well somewhere. And, I'll just say that we're in conversations with the water district right now about that. To Dee's point about the different funds, so it's a good point. Tonight, we're pretty much just talking about the general fund, because we're talking about general fund revenues and general fund expenses. The UT, which funds the general fund, because of the sunset, our revenue source for the general fund is going down, give or take, $800,000 to $1 million. And that is different than what's going on in the water and the sewer fund or any other, the internal fund. And the reason why it is a bit confusing, and I agree it's confusing, is because the way I look at I think the way that the city council looks at the budget is the revenue and the expenses for each fund are independent, right? We don't mesh and we don't cross streams. We don't fund general fund expenses with the water fund or the sewer fund or vice versa. Some cities do. I mean, you look at other cities and Glendale, for example. They do a lot of transfers out of their water fund and sewer fund into their general fund and vice versa. And that's been a bone of contention in that city for a number of years, and they're dealing with that now. And Madam City Manager probably knows that full well as the Assistant City Manager. We don't do that because we just don't think that's the right thing to do. I don't know if there's any governmental accounting standard that says you can't do that. But we do what our auditors say, and our auditors say it's best not to do that. So it is a bit confusing when you say, oh, well, this isn't impacting the general fund. Well, the way I look at that is there's certain expenses that just don't impact the general fund because it's paid by our water fund or our sewer fund. So it's not really you're paying, it's not like robbing Peter to pay Paul, because they are actually just completely separate enterprises. We have a water enterprise, we have a sewer enterprise, and then we have a general fund that, funds our police and community services and library. I don't know if I explained it that well, but I mean.
Can I explain one thing there too? With regard to additional tunnels, there used to be a tunnel in Bailey Canyon. It didn't really produce much, so it's closed up and sealed, and you won't ever be able to find it. Also, I know that there was I looked at all these engineering studies that were done over the years. There was one proposal to suggest that maybe in Lannon Canyon, up there by the Santa Anita Chantry Flat Road, that possibly we could put one there. But when you look at the watershed for that, it's not something that's going to produce a lot of water. Our tunnels just don't produce that much. It's not going to be something that is substantial. And also, when those tunnels were put in was before the turn of the last century. Try to get something done with CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. I mean, you can't hardly build a house without satisfying CEQA, much less tunnels. And I don't think the environmentalists would be too happy if we were putting more tunnels back there anyway. So that's just my opinion about it. I don't know if Director Inman would like to comment on that, because of course this has been thought of over the years and looked at.
Yep.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, if Director Inman would like to come up and comment on the tunnels, he can. And if you want to Mr. to Mr. Alcorn's point too, if you want to, you can comment on that too if you'd like. So, if you'd like, you don't have to.
All right. In regards to the tunnels, I'm currently working on an RFP for a consultant to come in and look at both tunnels to see what it would cost to upgrade both, to get the east tunnel back to drinking water standards, if it actually even can be done. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that these tunnels do not flow water consistently. They're very much subject to seasonal flow. The west tunnel, which has always produced the most water, has I checked with water staff, the most it's ever flowed was 500 gallons a minute. That's not a whole lot of water. Right now, it's flowing at a whopping 5 gallons a minute. So even if we could, or even if we were in a position right now to start work on those tunnels, right now, because of the drought conditions, it's not going to be a dependable source of water. And as the mayor noted, even in the best of times, it only provides 10% of the city's water. We had 1 year after those heavy rains in 2005-06 where we got 60 inches of rain. the tunnels flowed an enormous amount of water, but we weren't able to capture it all. It was flowing out through the vent holes in the doors of the tunnels. We weren't able to capture it, but that was one time in the 17 years I've been here. Most of the time, it's 500 gallons a minute or less. So it's not a source of water that is going to keep Sierra Madre afloat.
Thank you, Bruce.
Since we're on the subject, Mr. Ritchie's point about drilling in our East Raymond Basin, we've dealt with this in other, and I don't want to go too far with this on a budget discussion, but could you address that?
We did do a well siting study a few years ago. I believe it was about 2005. And we were not able to locate a good well site within Sierra Madre, within the East Raymond Basin. The best we could do was to find a site that was actually at the Duty Man House, which is very close to our existing well field. And the consultants at that time, the geologists said, you know what, it's probably not going to do you much good to drill a new well there because bedrock is going to be at the same shallow depth there as with our other wells. And drilling so close to your existing wells, you're just going to, when you turn the new well on, you're just going to drop the levels in your other wells. So there's no point in doing that. We would have to find a location somewhere very removed from our existing well field, perhaps somewhere in Arcadia. And what we've been talking about with our water district is actually drilling a well in Arcadia in the San Gabriel main basin as a source for getting water from our district.
One other question that Mr. Ritchie asked that we haven't answered is why is Arcadia still able to take water and we're not? But they cannot take more than their adjudicated rights. And our intention here in Sierra Madre is to take 100% of our adjudicated rights also. So our wells are turned off for now, but they're going to be turned back on at a point. Then we're going to take all the water available to us, and we'll probably turn them off again unless it rains heavily. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, you're correct in that. We have left our wells off until the new water treatment has taken effect, and we can actually, and when we've got the Dr. Baribeau's studies are completely done to show what we do to treat both our well water and the metropolitan water, because we're going to need to use both at the same time and have a treatment for both. Then we'll turn our wells back on, we'll pump our 940 acre feet, and then we'll shut our wells off. That's what we'll be doing.
That simple.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. And coming back to the budget, just so we can focus now, I guess our questions and comments going forward, the way I view it is there's a couple big questions that we as a council have to decide. You know, timing. Do we want, to Councilmember Del Mar's point, do we want as a council to start aggressively cutting now? I mean, there's a couple different options that we can do. We can live through this budget cycle as we've adopted, where we have a bit of a surplus and we know that 2015 we're fine, and you know we don't run into a deficit. We can do that, or we can start making the reductions now that we know we're going to have to make in 2016, 2017. So that's the big thing, like timing now, later, and then depending, I know where I stand on that, but depending on what we want to do, then I do think there's options. Look, there's the option to kind of nibble around the cookie, as we like to say, or make a series of cuts that we've outlined in here, you know, whether it's cutting off a few consultants here, trying to reduce FTEs in certain spots to get to a certain manageable point, and then maybe talk about more revenue. Or if we don't want to talk about more revenue, then it's really talking about how do we get $800,000 to $1 million out of this budget. And I agree with, you know, Councilmember Goss. I don't know how you do that with just, you know, systematic cuts throughout the various departments. I think you'll probably have to be talking about outsourcing a department, or maybe even two. So, you know, I'm not necessarily set on any of those options. I just think that those are some of the options that we have in front of us. Happy to hear other thoughts or ideas that everyone has, so that we can, I don't think we're going to come to an answer tonight, but maybe at least move the ball forward on narrowing some of those things. So, and I can go first. I mean, in terms of the timing, I don't think that it makes sense now to start trying before the end of this fiscal year. I don't think it makes sense to start making drastic cuts now. I don't think that we've adopted a budget to get us through the end of the fiscal year. And to me, I think we can live within that budget and then talk about the next biennial budget to get to that $800,000 number, if that's where we want to go, or whatever the number is. Does anyone disagree with that? I mean, does anyone have reservations about living through this next budget, knowing that the next biennial budget is somewhat of a cliff?
I'll just say this, at first, I expressed my opinion on that we should start working towards that, but half the fiscal year is,
Yeah.
we're quickly approaching half, and it's less and less practical to do that. So, perhaps we should have started immediately as soon as the council was elected and working towards cuts for that to be effective. We've got a 200+ thousand surplus. What I just don't want to see is that we use that surplus to balance the next year's
Future budgets, I agree.
So I'm okay. I'm going to be pretty flexible here because obviously I don't have the answers,
Yeah, I don't either.
To your point, Mayor, there are just so many factors to consider, and I think, as I was preparing for this, I outlined all the different things we need to think about, and I think one thing is the timing. And so the approach is to the 3-year budget, whether we make the cuts now, whether we make it with year 3 in mind, with a $800,000, $1 million budget gap, if expenses remain, well, I should say if revenue remains relatively the same. And then do we make the cuts now? Do we make it year 2? We make it year 3? So timing obviously is something you have to consider. The second thing is what our priorities are now, considering with the water moratorium, building moratorium, with the general plan that we keep saying we need to make sure that we expedite through. So there is work that needs to be done in these upcoming 2 years, and this is also why, going back to the last council meeting and the reorganizational structure that was pushing so hard for that, because with these budget cuts in mind, we still have work at the table that we need to get done, and we can only push off so much. So, yes, I will bring up the reorganization at some point, I'm sure tonight.
No, and I don't think that, I think that the reorg, the plan, and I said this last time, I think that should always be part of this, thinking about that plan and how we are going to reorganize potentially and the benefits and the salaries. I think it's fine to talk about during this.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to.
Yeah.
So, think about the strategies. Carrying over the surplus, is that something that we want to do? Do we look at reducing line items? We're going to have to. Whether it's, I know we had some proposals, or I should say some things to consider from the staff when you're looking at contractual line items, looking at other variable costs and some of the big ticket variable costs, and I kind of listed those out, and I don't need to go through it at this second. But the big ticket item is personnel costs. I mean, there's no question about that. And it was interesting because I was trying to find out in the report if personnel costs were called out for the percentage of total budget for general fund, and my calculations are correct. I think they are. It's about 74% of the total budget. It's huge. And I do have a question as I'm kind of just sharing my thoughts on this. Am I correct, City Manager, that the special revenue fund is totally separate from the general fund? Correct. Okay. So again, if my calculations are correct, it's about 74%. So we have to consider personnel costs, whether it is FTEs, that's part of it, contracting out, or eliminating some departments too. And I know that's not something that we want to consider, but it's something we have to think about and do some cost-benefit analysis and just see what costs look like. But the question is the timing and when we're going to do all that. And I think, big picture things, those are the strategy I was listing out, but I'd love to hear from other folks too if you have priorities. But again, I don't want us to discount the fact that we have the general plan and the building moratorium and water moratorium issues that we have to deal with within the next year, 2 years.
I have a couple things. I think that our budget that we have now is fine. I wouldn't want to go making any cuts to it this year. I think we have enough on our plates for this year. The one thing I would like us to keep in mind is our community and listen to them and hear what they have to say, and try to get us to that 8% with the community in mind. But I'm glad that Councilman Arizmendi brought up our workload, because we are on a deadline, and we do need to set our priorities. So I kind of think that might be our first thing we need to do, is set our priorities for the next 2 years. And that might guide us to where we need to be as far as our cutting. I also would like to look at our current contract services and see if we might be able to, I was looking at our development services. I know you did this before, you did an analysis, but I'd really like to see, how many hours we have our building inspectors out. Is it possible that now that we have more remodeling, we might be able to utilize one of have an FTE instead of our contract services and have them in the development services, doing the permits, that kind of thing, and really look at our contract services people. So I think we just need to kind of make a list. I think our first thing is what our priorities are, kind of go through those. I think we're going to have to cut some FTEs, either contract services out, listen to our people, maybe hold some community meetings. I do think, though, our first priority is getting to an 8%, using a UUT at an 8%, and let's see what we can do with that. If we can do it without being too painful.
A lot of very wise things said here. I can't really say I disagree with anyone here. I think that we will have to look at big ticket items as well. We might want to, you could approach this many different ways. 9 or 10 people out of our FTE load probably makes the nut. Anyway, are we supposed to micromanage that and pick the people, pick the positions? No, that's the city manager's job, but that could be something we could direct her to do. We could cut programs or end programs, or we could contract out programs. Messing around with contract services as we are sitting now, I've looked at those. Most of those things we can't really do without. A lot of those contract services are kind of just baked into making the city run from day to day. The three of us up here just ran for office this year, and I guess I got a strong message, and it was kind of a mixed message, because I was getting from people a very strong sense of satisfaction with city services. I don't know how many times I had people tell me how much they thought our police department was fantastic. I mean, there were some people who complained about it, of course, but overall, a lot of people are very pleased with our level of police services. I sat on the library board last year, and we did a very substantial plan for the library, strategic plan, and part of that was a very high respondent-rich survey, and what I got from that survey was not only do the people love the library, they wanted to do a lot more. And this is the same people that told us by about 85 votes that they want to see the revenue to pay for all these things cut. So I'm having a hard time squaring those two things. I also saw, I went door to door to door as council members Del Mar and Arizmendi did. And we all heard this. We kind of compared notes during the campaign. We all heard this about Public Works, that the water issue is very important to them, and that they wanted a better quality of water, and they were concerned about the price of water. And so what I get from all that is we need to find efficiencies. We have to find efficiencies. We have to encourage innovative cost-cutting strategies in every department. We really need to impress our managers with that. And how you do that is a managerial question. It's not something I think we should rightfully be telling our management to do. But I want to say right now, I think the managers ought to be coming to us, telling us what they're doing in terms of cost-cutting strategies. And there are a lot of things that can be done out there. But I think we also need to just take a deep breath and go, government is about not just the fiscal stuff, right? It's not just balancing budgets. Government is about making a community work. So I'm not exactly sure, I'm new to this, but I'm not exactly sure I want to take us down the scorched earth path. because I don't know if you get that back. I don't know if the community will be the same if you take a library out of commission, if you contract out your police department, bring in the sheriff's department, and all of a sudden you have all kinds of customer service problems. I don't know if you follow the news, but I've been following the news in the last year, and the sheriff's department's got some pretty significant PR problems. Could Arcadia be any better? Would Pasadena be any better? In any case, if we turn it over to them, you're not going to be coming up here during open public comment to tell us about problems with your police. You're going to be going down to the County Board of Supervisors or the City Council of Arcadia. Do you really want that? I sure don't. And I've met very few people campaigning in this city this year that want that. So I really, now going to this point of when we start, I don't see any reason, I don't see any advantage to cutting this fiscal year. I don't see how that would advantage us. But I think we need to light a fire under all our managers. We've got to find ways to cut costs. I think the taxpayers are owed that. We need to show them up front that we're very serious about this. And I don't know how that would be. But we also need to talk about revenue too. I don't know what that would be. Would that be fees? I'm not sure. But and ultimately, I told people when I campaigned, and I sent it out in my literature, and I'm a man of my word. I said I would not be open to the idea of contracting out police services, and I stated that I will stick with that commitment at this point in time. But I do believe that maybe we ought to go ahead and get bids nonetheless, just to see what it would cost, see how much we would save, and let the public see that. If the public really looks at that and they see an advantage, let the public come in and tell us that. But they'd need the numbers first. And I'd need to be persuaded by the public, because right now I'm not persuaded of that. So I don't know what the next step would be, but I think we have a good group here. I feel like our hearts are all in the right place, and I think we're going to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just piggyback on that for a minute? 'Cause
Please.
I think what Councilman Goss is saying is sort of on point, and going out and talking door to door, I actually heard people who did have a lot of complaints about the city, and maybe we went to different doors, but
I'd heard those too.
and a lot of people were saying it wasn't so much that they just felt overwhelmed. They felt overwhelmed by constantly being asked for more taxes and the water increases and not seeing anything for that money. And I think, closing City Hall, I hate to harp on that, but that's a big thing for the citizens of the Sierra Madre. We're closing City Hall, and it really didn't save any money, and we cut down on customer service. And those little issues doesn't seem like a lot, but for the community it really is. And we need to build the community trust again, and we need to build those efficiencies again. And once again, that was part of the reorganization and cutting down our health benefits. We haven't even touched that surface. If we can reduce a lot of money that way. So there are a lot of things that we can do before we start contracting out services, before we start doing our FTEs. But again, I'd just like to reiterate, we really need to do our priorities, get our priorities, what we need to do for the rest of this year, and get ourselves down to that 8% UUT and then go from there. I think if we try to do everything at once, it's going to be too overwhelming for us, and we just need to piece it a little bit at a time.
Can I respond to that? I agree, Councilmember Del Mar. I did get a few of those complaints. Every now and then I would hear about concerns from people about police officers issuing too many tickets. And I certainly heard a lot about the water quality. We all did. But by and large, what I heard from people, and when I'd ask them, give me your take on the city, what would you like to see done better? What are the highs and lows? Anybody who'd give me any time gave me very positive responses. I mean, I'm not making this up. I spent months doing this. And obviously when you get negative responses, those make a big impression on you. But I came away with this, that the problems we have are workable, but that we have a reservoir of goodwill out there from most of our citizens. And I think we need to build on that. while taking into account the very valid concerns of the people who voted down our utility tax. The same people, basically, the same people. So I say attacking this, we have a legal fiduciary responsibility to balance this budget, and we're gonna do that, come heck or high water. I just hope that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Please.
I'd just like to say that I believe one of our highest priorities is to come up with a plan to get the budget balanced throughout fiscal years 2016, 2017, and going forward. To me, that is one of the highest priorities that we have to do. I just disagree that we should look at just getting to losing the first 2%. I think we need to address the whole picture and do it all at one time, come up with a plan to get us where we need to go. That should be one of our highest priorities. I do have a question for Councilmember Goss, because you've done this, pardon me?
I'm in trouble now.
Well, no, but you have done this twice in 2 years' time as far as knocking on doors and reaching out to the public. Did anything really change fundamentally between 2010 and 2012?
Not at all, not
Yeah.
one bit. It depends on how you approach people, and I've got two people who won office here too, and they had success too. And a lot of people you talk to, they come out and they say, it's nice that you're running for office, you seem like a nice guy, I don't have a whole lot to say.
Yeah.
But most people don't complain. Most people don't say, well, the police are terrible, or
Yeah.
I'm spending too much taxes. Most people are basically content. And maybe that sounds like a cop-out, but you know what? If most people are content, then they're content. I mean, I don't want to create the impression that the people who are very upset should be taken lightly, because there are people who are very upset, people who've had bad run-ins with our police, people who've had brown water for a year, people who have income issues and where the utility tax is more than a marginal concern in their household budgets. We have to take them seriously.
Yeah.
So to me, we have to find a balance here, because we represent everyone, not just the people who are the most vocal about their complaints.
So I would just like to suggest, maybe just as far as a path forward, I do think we need to look at the scorched earth, okay? Just assume that we're going to keep our major departments. We're going to have a library, we're going to have a police department, we're going to continue with the way the fire department operates today. So get us to, Madam City Manager, get us to that, figure out a way to cut. And I'll just say this again, in my mind, I know that you need direction, but I just want to say this, I've heard this, I don't know that anybody disagree, but if you do, please say so. But I think public safety is first and foremost in this town. I think this is what the city needs to provide for its citizens first and foremost, to ensure that our town remains safe. This is why a lot of us came to this town, and I still believe, I can speak for myself, and I still believe that's true with people moving in. Next thing that in order of importance, I think, is public works. We need to keep our streets and our sidewalks reasonably well maintained. I mean, this goes back to the broken windows theory that Chief Bratton was successful with in New York City. Our town, our property values will degrade if we don't take care of our infrastructure. Okay, beyond that, I don't want to prioritize, but community services is very important. When I look at the Mount Wilson Trail Race, the 4th of July Parade, some of the recreation programs we do, this is minimal. I don't think we do a lot, but it's important. I'd hate to see that go away completely. Obviously, the library is important to many, many people. I can't tell you, I have no opinion as to what percentage, whether that's 30, 50, 60%. I do know that there are people that suggest we get rid of the library. I don't know if that is a minority or majority, but that's out there. But, we can live without recreation and we can live without library. But I don't think we can live, this town is just not going to be Sierra Madre as we know if we don't keep it safe and if we let our infrastructure go to hell in a handbasket. So I would just say, you may need more direction from that. I'd like to hear what other people think, but that is one thing, is to look at just how to cut to get us to that. I do believe we ought to go out for bids to contract services. We ought to look at police and fire, and we ought to look at library, and I don't know if it's possible to do the community services, if that's even possible to contract, but community services is only, $200-something thousand out of the general fund budget. That in itself isn't going to get us, but combined with library, combined with something else, maybe that'll work. But I think we owe it to our citizens is to have the options on the table. I personally believe that our town wishes to keep its own police department, but I don't think that the residents are really clear on what the cost benefit of that. If we could look a little bit more closely at what it might cost for the sheriff to come in, and possibly Arcadia would be willing to give us a bid this time, then we can evaluate that and more closely than what was done last time, because I don't believe that there was any citizen involvement with the last time in 2010 when you went out to get bids for various agencies to look at the police. But we need to evaluate those so that our citizens can see the cost versus benefit. If there is savings, what are we losing? It may be that we can improve service and cut. I don't know. I don't believe that, but we need to find out. We need to find out whether it's possible to contract our library services, or even look at the possibility of just getting rid of the library altogether. And I know there are going to be a lot of people up in arms about what I just said, but I'm just saying that we need to look across the board and get feedback from our citizens as to which of the options are most viable. A scorched earth one, as I just mentioned, and different combinations of contracting out. And I think the timing is we need to do it right away, because it's going to take at least a year and a half to get to the point where we can actually do it. So we're going to be eating into our reserves here if we don't figure out how to get one of these three options done. So that'd be my suggestion.
Go ahead, please.
I think you picked up my notes, Mayor Pro Tem. And these are notes that I would like, I would like to share my notes with the rest of the council and for those and to make this public. But yes, I agree that the two main priorities that I listed was public safety and city infrastructure also, and services to residents. I do agree that we need to seriously take a look at contracting out, just so we understand what the costs are, so we have that to evaluate and to assess. And then I also have other specifics. I really think we need to, well, I don't really think, I know we need to look at our organizational structure. Again, 74%, if I'm calculating correctly, of our general fund is coming from personnel. We need to look at efficiencies. We need to look at flow. Anytime I've looked at budget cuts, it's where I had to start, is looking at your personnel costs, especially considering it's the big lion's share. So with that being said, I do have specifics that I'd like to share, and I don't need to list them all out, but I'll just kind of go through it. The staff, we did direct the staff to take a look at what their cuts would look like with the variables, and the 10%, I really don't like the idea of a certain percentage across the board, because every service is different, and you can't just assume that an across-the-board cut is, because it works out in numbers, is going to make sense for services, and we're considering our priorities. But I know there was initial $168,000 that we can look at cutting from the general fund line items, and that was what the staff had proposed. Mm-hmm. But I also have a lot of questions with contractual and professional, and I have a list here. I am not suggesting that we eliminate it altogether, but I would like to know what these services are so we can determine what they are for. And I'll just kind of list them really quickly, and I can give this to Madam City Manager so we can get some, at least I can get some responses what these are for. Police, it looks like we have 8,800 with City of Pasadena for contract. We have 24,000 Humane Society. We have 55,000 that the police is contracting out. I didn't see what that was for. But again, I'm highlighting these big ticket items. 69,000 for Verdugo with the fire department. UCLA has 23,000. Public Works, we're looking at 71,000 for landscaping. So again, I have a list of items that I'd like to see what those costs are for, whether one, they can be eliminated, or two, at least be reduced. And then the other big ticket variables I saw, and again, I'll just give a list, I'll hand over a list to you, Madam City Manager, but just so that the City Council understands what I was looking at. Library, books, and references, 61,000. Vehicle maintenance, I know for fire, it's $101,000. I know we need to maintain, but again, what can we look at to reduce there? Vehicle maintenance for police, general fund, 120,000. ISF, fleet, automotive equipment, 212. So I just pulled out the big ticket items. Again, I know some costs are we need some of those costs, even though they're variable, but to take a look and see what we can do there. And just other notes, I think we kind of hit all of those, but the contracting out, again, as much as we may not want to consider that as the end decision, we just need to have real data and facts to be able to compare to determine what the cost benefits are for our city.
Can I ask a question of Councilman?
And then I think, yeah, absolutely, and then Councilmember Del Mar has a question.
So all the big ticket items that you listed right here, what's the total on that? Did you add that up?
No, I didn't, and the reason why is because I was going to try and see if we took it all out together, but I knew we couldn't do that, so I didn't total it. But
Okay, well, I'm gonna just suggest
it's an
this.
Excel spreadsheet, so I can
You
just
know,
total it out.
having been through this a whole whopping 2 years more than you have, you know, we've looked at these things various times, and we've all asked questions about them, and, you know, I remember the reason we do some of these, not all of them, but my take is that there's probably some opportunity, maybe, where we could cut some of that, but I would just make an assumption to say there's a percentage, perhaps, that can be cut, and how close does that get us to where we need to be? And that's my conclusion after going through an exercise like that. It's the nibbling around the edges again.
Sure, and,
So-
and I agree, that's why I was going back to the personnel cost, is because
Yes.
we cannot get around that. That's gonna be where we are gonna be able to minimize that gap of whether it's $800,000 or $1 million at the end of fiscal year 2017. Yes, this is just nibbling,
Right.
but at
But
the
on the
same
personnel
respect, we
costs,
still need to look at it.
I'm absolutely with you on personnel costs. The conclusion I come to on personnel costs is that to get to those personnel costs, we have to stop doing a lot of things that we do today. I mean, again, we've all sat and, you know, done what you've done, pored over the numbers, sat with department heads, sat with people, and looked at ways to do this, and I'm a little tapped out on that. I can't really find anything substantial. I'm sure I could find things that I could look at, and I just think that some of that should be done offline, perhaps with you and the city manager, to see what you think based on your expertise, what you're bringing to the table. I hope you've got some good ideas and ways to do it. I think we need to think a lot bigger and deeper right now. I don't think that's going to get us there. So
It's not, but
right.
no
So the
no
question is, what are we going to stop doing? Are we going to stop our recreation programs? Are we going to stop the parade? How much are we going to cut out of the library? I didn't mean to imply that I thought that police and fire and public works was off the table, but I just, as a matter of prioritizing, to say that I don't want to see public safety jeopardized. But yeah,
Right.
if we're going to do this and keep our police department and other departments, there needs to be some, but I agree with you, not the 10 or 20% across the board. We have to figure out where, and that's why I prioritized in that way. I thought more had to come out of the back end than the front end.
For some numbers, the July 22nd staff report actually did exactly what Councilmember Arizmendi has done. We came up with, and these are the numbers that are in the July 22nd report, of the professional services in the general fund, 57%, or about $703,000, are mandated by law or policy. The remaining $445,000 are things that are discretionary, but that includes things like, you mentioned the $71,000 for landscaping. We can eliminate that, but that means our parks will never be mowed by
That's what I was looking at, not
contractor. Yeah,
necessarily eliminating,
but
but
eliminating the things that we're not required by law to do, like mow our parks. The total amount of that savings is about $455, but the staff report goes on to say, do we really want to stop mowing our parks? The animal control, do we really want to not have a dog catcher in town picking up dead animals? So those things, we don't have to have them. They amount to $445, but what would the town be like without
But
a
city
dog
manager-
catcher? Without,
Let me just respond really quickly. I definitely took into account
you
what
did
the
break it out.
report
Uh-huh.
was, what you provided in the report, and what the staff provided in the report, but I even broke it down on top of that. So by no means am I saying one thing needs to be eliminated, but there might be areas of the variables that can be decreased. It is gonna be small amounts, but if we are looking at where else can we tighten our belt, we need to be looking at every line item. So-
I agree.
Sorry, Councilman, Delmar, did you have a?
Yeah, I do. And I agree with everything, but at the same time, you have to, and I agree with what you're saying, Councilman Capocia, but at the same time, you also have to kind of think out of the box and go into, just because you contract services out doesn't mean it's going to be cheaper. Because yeah, exactly. So you have to do a little bit of everything. So we need to find out what those costs are going to be. We need to look at a reorganization. We need to look at our efficiencies. We need to make sure we have staff in the right positions. We need to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. We need to start doing that right now. So to say, what are we going to stop? What are we going to end? We don't really know right now. We need to look at the numbers. So I don't want the community to get all excited thinking we're just going to stop things all of a sudden. We're really just gathering the information, seeing what we have, and seeing where we're going to be. And, without that extra utility tax, and you never know. Being in this line of work, I can tell you sometimes it's more expensive when you contract services out because you're still paying people to do the work. And you're also paying an agency to do that, and sometimes you're paying more for that hourly. So I hope we don't all get our hopes up that we can contract these services out and it's going to be cheaper, because it may not. So,
I
yeah.
understand, but again, I'm going based
So we
on
also
what
have
I
to look at
saw.
expenses, even if it's a little bit at a time.
Sure.
And I respect the fact that you all have gone through this before, but fresh eyes may be able to see something else.
Yeah, I
And fresh
hope
eyes.
that's the case.
And I would like to even look at the reorganization, look at our health and benefits, look at our retirement benefits. All of that needs to be put on the table. So when I talk about our priorities, it's not what we're going to cut. I talk about our priorities and our workload, what the city manager needs to do, as well as the budget. And the budget is a priority. Absolutely, it is a priority. But there are some other priorities too in the city.
Okay.
City manager, you were about to finish a point, I think, and then.
I was gonna say, I still need some direction, because I don't quite
Yeah, and I don't
understand what
think.
you want.
Yeah, no, I think,
Bring-
and
You
to be
just need to do
fair.
everything.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
I can do everything.
To be fair,
We can bring back, every time we contracted out something, we can bring back the staff reports. We always did a cost-benefit analysis when we decided to contract parks maintenance instead of doing it in-house. We have those staff reports, so it's very easy. When we contracted out building and safety instead of doing it in-house, that saved money. So we can bring back the staff reports. That's relatively quick and easy to do. But when it comes to really making, we've said it before, those aren't going to amount to $800,000. It really is going to come down to staffing. And without any direction from the council, I think, there was a chart I used to always use in budget presentation, staffing equals services. You can't just say we're gonna get rid of a staff. We're talking about getting rid of services. And we're at the point now where, I can go back and make stuff up that might end up getting people upset, cut the library hours in half. That's a minimum level we could provide to still kind of have some library services. Sorry to pick on the library, but, I can just do those things.
That dog's getting
But then
kicked
I'm
tonight,
going to
yeah.
be, I'm going to be criticized for, why them and why a half, why not, 3/4 of it reduction, it saves more money. I can do this, but I'm just concerned that what's gonna come back is
So-
still not gonna be what you want to see. And and Councilmember Capocia has hit the nail on the head. We really don't have a lot of time. We're literally months away from the first 6%. So we don't have a lot of time to solve this. And the longer it takes us, we will be dipping into reserves, which I know none of us want to do, till we figure out how to resolve this. They really, and I know it's difficult and there are huge, huge decisions, but that's the point where we're at now. We have already, through the last 4 budgets that I've been here for, have done the managerial efficiencies, we've reduced staff, we've contracted what we could. We're down to the point where I have to say, if I was to go back to staff, the only managerial efficiencies are going to be more contracting out. There isn't any way to do anything more efficient. We're already down to the minimum staff we can have for the services we provide today. So it is a reduction in services, and it would help if I knew which services are on the table for us to
Yeah.
come back with something.
So I'll try to, I guess, summarize, because I think every council member had really good points, and some of them I think are independent of each other. Because I do think that there isn't total agreement up here, as I don't think there should be after one meeting on this, as to, the right path, or, do we shut off some certain options that we have now and go one way, or do we just keep everything on the table? I think what I'm hearing is we're going to keep a lot of this on the table right now, and we're going to probably give you, which you won't love, some pretty broad direction, right? And we might have some specific things that we give you right now, but what I'm hearing is, let's take a step back. A couple council members brought up the point that maybe we don't go all the way to 800,000 or $1 million. Maybe we only cut to 500,000 right now. Maybe, because look, maybe revenue comes in higher. Maybe property taxes are higher than we think. Maybe certain things happen with, other revenue. Maybe utility rates go up, to such an extent that, as we project already, that, the loss of 4% in our UUT isn't as much of a deficit as we think. So I think that we have to leave on the table the option of not going full Monty on this, that we only go to 500. And I think that option in and of itself changes a lot of the outlook on, whether we're completely contracting out and outsourcing a department. And I think, and whether that's feasible. I think within that option, for example, I think the idea of maybe looking at cutting here, cutting certain contract services or reducing certain FTEs in certain places, that becomes a lot more reasonable and a lot more feasible in my mind. So I think one of the options on the table has to still be, we don't go all the way to 800, we don't go all the way to $1 million. Because I think that has to be something that we at least look at right now. Now, if we do go to 800 or $1 million, I don't think there's any disagreement up here that people want to see the numbers on outsourcing. And I think public safety is one of them that we're going to have to see the numbers on, whether it makes sense. I think the library is one thing that we have to see the numbers on, whether it's just shutting it down or whether it's outsourcing it, and whether you can actually outsource the remaining recreation and community services that we provide. I think we will all like to see those numbers be brought back, right? So I think those are a couple things that that's specific direction on that. But I do think that there are some remaining things that we're going to have to talk about in future meetings, which is, in terms of priorities, I don't think anyone will disagree with our priorities up here. I do think public safety, infrastructure, all that are our priorities. But in order to get to that 800, I'm talking about the 800 to $1 million option now, when we're going to go full, we're going to try to get to that number, I still think that there's probably some debate there, what you can do. I think that, I'm of the mindset that you probably have to look at outsourcing a full department or shutting down a full department. I don't know if that's necessarily where we stand as a council right now. So I don't want us to, I'm hearing a couple people say, and I'm in that camp, I think, where let's go and see what
See the numbers first, and the
right? And
cost-benefit
then come back.
analysis and pros and cons.
And then from there, we'll figure it out.
I understand
It's
that.
gotta be brought before,
That's right.
has to be brought before us, and we need community feedback on it.
I understand.
So, and I think from your standpoint, from staff, it's tough because you're not going to get the magic bullet, the silver bullet tonight. And I don't think there's a magic answer.
This is enough, I understand.
Is this enough?
Mhm.
Okay.
This is better.
But, I think there were some very good things brought up tonight. I do think that there's a viable discussion to have about, do we get to $500,000 and is that sufficient in 2 years? I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I would hope that in 2 years, the budget deficit is actually only 550 and not 750.
Mayor, I'm really concerned about this NPDES
DES.
Yes?
and why there's such a big disparity between 200,000 and 400,000. To me, that's a really,
Just because we haven't done a budget yet, Councilmember Delmar. We haven't put a budget together
yeah,
yet.
that to me is really.
Until we sit down and do the line item budget, I can't tell you what that's gonna come in
I would,
at.
I really need to see that before anything else too.
So for the next budget discussion, what have we, the consensus is we have a lot of things coming back, and I think it's all these options. The one is the timing, we didn't really answer that question for you specifically, but I think from what I'm hearing up here, everyone's keeping the current.
Fiscal year line.
right? And then, but Councilmember Arizmendi brought up a good point. Do you do everything in year 2, or do you stagger it, year 2 and year 3? To me, I think staggering it's probably, this might be a little bit more specificity than you need now, but I wouldn't necessarily want to go $800,000 or $1 million in cuts in 2016 just to get us to 2017. Right? I mean, to me, I would stagger it, but we don't necessarily have to agree on that tonight, unless that helps you. I mean, do you need that? I don't think you need that
No.
bit of particularity. Okay.
I think we should have a goal for a
Regarding-
balanced
We
budget in
should. We should.
2016.
We should have a goal of a balanced budget in 2016, because that's a lot
But
easier.
if I can say this, if we have a path to get us to 2017, then I'd be willing to maybe carry over some if we have a path to get to where ultimately we need to go. So to me, that's why I keep saying that I think the end game is what needs to be focused on more so than the short-term
Yeah.
problem
That's
of
always
next
the
year.
focus, but you always have to, you can't have a plan to go to the end. You always have to have your little objectives along the
Well,
way.
you need direction, and
Yeah.
we need to get the pieces in place today that is gonna provide that direction. That's why I keep harping on this. I think we're running out of time here. There's no way to balance this budget by chopping each,
Well, you guys should have started 2 years ago.
Look.
we could have started 6 months
could've,
ago
I should've,
when the new
It's-
council members got
Let
seated.
me, if I could recommend
Yeah.
a proposal going to sort of next steps.
Yep.
We'll break it down in pieces. I can tell you that getting the contracts, getting estimates on public safety, police, fire, library, community services, that's a 4 to 6 month process. I've done that here before. It takes that long to get the information for the proposed contractors to give us the estimate. So that's 4 to 6 months out. The things that we've already scheduled, I pestered you for additional meetings. We have another meeting, special meeting scheduled for November. We can use that meeting. We have enough time to bring back the details on the contract services, so we can go through those in detail to figure out if there is some cost savings, how much we could get from looking at those in detail and see what we might be
And
able
to
to get
maybe
some
even take
cost
care of
savings there.
2016, right? I mean.
Right, I'm talking for
Right.
2000, not for the current fiscal
Yeah.
year. There'll be reductions we make for the new fiscal year, and we can be back a tighter estimate on the MPDES stuff in the November meeting also.
And in order to make a really good decision, we'll need to know our total health and welfare benefits and our PERS, right?
I wouldn't propose bringing those back just yet. That's sort of part of the reorg, and I'm not proposing to bring that back now.
We just
I
need to
am.
know how much we pay in it.
The grand total, we can give you the grand total.
Yeah, I would want to know that.
Okay?
Can I ask you if the estimates for contracting services out, whether you're looking at departments, does that include also coordinating efforts with local cities, or is it just like, let's take police for instance, is it just a sheriff
No.
estimate, or is it
For
options
public,
of
for
looking
for
at?
police, we would contact, what we did the last time was we sent letters to all of our neighboring cities that have police departments and the sheriff's department.
Got it, okay.
So that could include conceivably Arcadia, Monrovia, Pasadena, the sheriffs. I think those are, they need to be contiguous to us at least.
Okay.
Do we ever work with that Independent Contracting Cities Association at all?
We,
Get information from them?
And then there's one option that we never, look, we have healthy reserves in the city, and there's always the option, and other cities do this, where they will balance, and I think that we're all on the same page that we don't want to do this, but just so this isn't an option that we bring back, is anyone prepared up here to potentially go to, let's say, $400,000 in cost cutting, and then use reserves to get us to, the next spot?
What are reserves at right now?
slightly more than 5 million.
5 million, yeah.
And I wouldn't, I mean, I would be very cautious about saying that we even think about that. I know it's something we can think about and
It's an
we
option.
should, but at this plan as if it is going to be the $800,000 shortage or the $1 million shortage. But I just wanted to add on too, is as much as I hear agreement here about keeping this fiscal year the same, again, bringing back the reorganization, I don't think we should be doing business the same as usual. We really need to start thinking forward, looking at these efficiencies, looking at the flow, because the longer we take with that, the harder it is going to be for us to make decisions as to how to cut. And it's going to affect services no matter what, but it's going to be even worse if we don't start implementing some changes at this point. So that's great if we're going to keep the budget the same for this current fiscal year, but I don't think we should keep putting off whatever reorganization that we are looking at, because it ultimately will be to the downfall of our services to our community.
I'll just say, I'm okay with that. There were just some things that I didn't think was right that was in there. And we accepted a couple of things. There are other things in it that I like. If we can just work on it and get to where we got something that we can all agree on, then I'm fine with that. I mean, a question of timing, and I'll leave that to you guys to figure out, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine too, talking about that within the budget discussion, so.
Because I think it does blend well together.
Well, I don't. I don't think it did. I think it was increasing salaries at a time when we're talking about cutting budgets. I got a lot of feedback from people who were upset about that. And so I don't think that it's so simple. Look, if you guys if you're interested in cutting health benefits, if that's what's really concerns you, that's so baked right into that plan, okay, let's put it out on the table. Let's talk about it. Okay, I'm good with that. But if we're going to do a reorg, let's do a reorg to cut costs, not increase costs. I know long-term 5 years is going to cut costs. Well, we're not worried about 5 years now. We're not worried about the next 2 years, the next 3 years. So, I mean, if we're going to bring that back, let's at least, can we agree?
Maybe
we
we
at
can
least
bring it back
agree, if
and-
I could finish,
Okay.
at least we could agree that we're trying to cut costs in the short term. That's good. If we're willing to do that, I'm good with it.
If we can bring it back, maybe we can explain that part a little better, because I think if we explain that a little better, you would understand it more.
I understand it perfectly well. Thank you very much.
I'll just say this about it. I mean, we did not have a projection of costs in the package.
Right.
That was not there. So that would be helpful
I
to
think
put
so.
that in.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm happy to keep discussing, I don't think that you can get around what we're discussing here and not talking about potential changes in the way we deliver services. And, I think that the plan that was presented is a platform to continue that conversation. I mean, that's all I'll say. And I don't think Councilmember Goss was saying anything differently there. I mean, I think that there was a lot that we can work with there. And, going through this budget, just looking at 2016, maybe that helps us get there. Maybe it does. We can continue that conversation. But is there anything else that we've left unresolved? Because I don't think we're going to solve all this tonight, obviously. And we've taken out 2 hours, not that long, but we're going to have to do this a few times. Is there anything that we've left unresolved in anybody's mind?
Not that it's unresolved, but for something like the budget, are we willing to consider a subcommittee? Because I would be happy to serve on that if that is something that's helpful, and/or, again, I don't know.
Even after your last experience on a subcommittee, you would be willing to do that?
I would not want to be on this
Yeah.
subcommittee, but I would recommend this lady, because she's really good with the numbers.
So
But
I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea in theory. Every subcommittee that I've been on, and you guys were just on one, I think it's hard for the subcommittee members for various reasons. One, when you bring the plan to the rest of the council, I think that there are levels of knowledge and kind of buy-in on certain things, and then when the other council members don't, necessarily agree with you, I do think it leads to maybe more division within the council than necessary, and I found that on subcommittees that I've served on. We had a marketing subcommittee, we had a business recruitment subcommittee. It seemed like every time the subcommittee would come with every time they would come with a recommendation, it was voted down. I'm almost positive.
I want to concur with that, because
Yeah.
even our water subcommittee, we could not sell 3 council
Never.
members on the things that Josh and I felt were very important.
And I've just seen historically, every subcommittee has been shot down by the majority, and, so I don't want to waste anyone's time, I guess, is my,
I mean, I can appreciate that, but I guess, and another way to look at it too is if there is a subcommittee form that, we can look at multiple options to consider and not just, this is the one way. But I feel really strongly about it because, and I can also just give notes over.
Yeah.
See,
We can just do that.
nothing would prevent any council, a lot of this is just number crunching that staff needs to do. Nothing would prevent me from meeting with any council member at any level of detail they desire. Putting all the information out there, with each of you individually.
And there's
We could
nothing
do
that
that.
prevents you from crunching your numbers and giving us copies.
yeah.
Yep.
Or
She's
just,
really good at that.
Well, and I do think, though, that it might even be more efficient for your time, we just shared up here, because I think we're going to have a ton of these conversations, and I think this is going to be a 15-month process, right? I mean, hopefully we'll get the answer before then, but I think we have a little bit of time as a group to do it. I would not want to see you and whoever else is on the subcommittee go out and just burden yourself with it and then come back and get burned. I just don't think that this project, which is the budget, is an easy task for a subcommittee to do. So, but look, if we come back next meeting and we think, hey, there's pieces that we can subcommittee out, I mean, I'm not necessarily against it. I just, having lived through a few subcommittees now, I just don't know if it's going to be the best thing for us. So,
Well,
I think subcommittee for informational.
yeah, I mean, you could, right? I mean, you could do a subcommittee just on the contracting out piece, or you could do,
To go visit another town or,
Sure.
something like that.
yeah, one-off projects.
You bet.
Mayor Pro Tem, you
I would just say is, I'm not big on it either, but I do have time, and I'd be willing to work with Councilmember Arizmendi and the staff, but I want to be very sensitive about staff time. So I want to ask that question, do you think it would be helpful? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but, I mean, seriously,
At this-
we're all
I
friends.
understand. At this point in time, it would be more efficient
Uh-huh.
for staff to start returning with these preliminary things.
Uh-huh,
The contracts.
Yeah.
The total cost for health and PERS. And the third thing, MPDS cost. It's gonna be more efficient for us just to do the staff report and return with it. I think as we get into further details where we need to do outreach regarding the contracting out proposals.
Yeah.
Subcommittees may make sense at that point.
yeah,
I think what you're expecting to come back in a month,
yeah.
it'd be quicker for us just to crank the numbers and present them
Yeah,
to
and
council.
I wouldn't be, believe me, I wouldn't be in a position to make recommendations. I think this is such a big deal that I wouldn't want to be, as a subcommittee, making recommendations to the council on the budget. This is just something that has to be completely,
When it comes to making recommendations, but it should be something that's,
Yeah.
you're equally knowledgeable about,
yeah,
and the discussion happens obviously here in the public as it should.
yeah, yeah.
And I just have a couple just off-the-wall questions. The franchise fees, someone just explain that to me? What are franchise fees? Do you all know what those are? And I'm just the only one who does it?
generally, but, the city manager will have more expertise than I would.
We collect franchise fees from the various utilities in Athens. Basically, franchise fees are in exchange for a company having an exclusive contract to do something in town,
Okay.
whether it's provide electricity or natural gas or telephone services or trash services.
Okay, and then they charge us.
Franchise fees are generally passed on to the customers.
Okay, so that's that one. And then for the Kensington property, is that gonna be a big tax bill for us income-wise?
There will be an increase.
I think, was
I'm gonna say it's about 40,000 was the number I remember. We do have a staff report on that.
Okay.
I'll have to pull it to get you the exact number.
I can find it. You don't have to look
Have
it up.
we, but have we included that in the projections?
Yes.
Yeah, we have.
We have included that
Yes.
one? Okay.
I didn't know, yeah.
And, I think, when do we anticipate getting our audit for the 14 fiscal year?
That was in the presentation this evening. I believe I said January, February.
Okay, not until then. Okay, that's all I have.
Nope. Question before we
Well, I do want to comment on the subcommittee.
Please.
You guys want to put the time in and effort in, I'm all for that. If that's the will of the council, I'm with you on that. I think that would be helpful, but if it gets in the way of staff, work with them. But I mean.
I'm okay with-
ultimately,
I'm
if
okay
two
with
people
keeping on
have
the
the time and
yeah.
interest, it would probably save staff some time, I think, in the long run. I don't know.
Here's what we'll do. She'll bring, Madam City Manager will bring back the next round in a month, and then I think we'll leave this idea on the table. If we think, I think from there, if it makes sense, we can do it. Full caveat emptor to the subcommittee members, though. You know, I mean, historically. Yeah, maybe parsing it out, but it's just a lot of time and work for you guys, and I don't want to waste your time.
And
so.
just to sort of sleep on, it will be, the next phase of this, when we are looking at service level reductions, as a council member, you need to, I mean, that's a tough one. You'll be recommending to your councils, it's no more, get rid of our special programs, it's, reducing hours of life. That's gonna be tough, and as a council, you
But it's
decide you
true.
really wanna be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean,
You
that's
probably
a good
do,
point.
you probably do, but just be prepared
Yeah.
for the same pushback staff would get, you'll be getting it, why did you recommend that instead of that?
I want to make a comment on that. I mean, I don't have a problem making those kinds of preliminary suggestions, knowing full well that it would be impossible for 5 people to agree on what 2 people come up with. So, I don't have a problem doing that, because I know that you're gonna bring your perspective to the table, and there'll have to be adjustments. But somebody's gotta put something on the table to start with.
Yeah, and maybe you do have multiple subcommittees on this too, so. Go
Well,
ahead.
I agree. So, I mean, the bottom line is, I mean, we have to do something. I'm willing to do it. This is the job I signed up for. I knew this readily, walking into this back in April. So, I'm ready to step up to the plate. With that being said, I think what we are going to be looking at are multiple options. I don't think there's
Yeah.
going to be one perfect solution out there. So to be able to bring as many options to the council, I think is beneficial to all of us and to this entire city, is to be able to say, these are the different things we can do. This is how we can combine these different options. And you're right, our time is valuable right now, and we are coming down to the wire. Look how fast 6 months just came. So 2 years will be here before we know it.
And not to scare anyone, but really, we need a new fiscal year budget in just 8 months. We start a new fiscal year, so really,
Well,
we
and
only
that's-
have 8 months for the next fiscal year budget to
Yeah,
get it
that's
done and
hopefully what we're
adopted.
trying to do, yeah. So, any parting comments or thoughts? I'll open it back up for the public if, I know,
I have something.
Yeah,
I just
please.
want to say, I think this went very well. For,
there's a lot there.
for a really tough discussion. Thank you all. I think it went well.
I agree. We'll open it up. I think last meeting, folks, I think wanted another bite at the apple at public comment, so I'll open it up if anyone wants to ask any questions or make any comments.
Hi, Pat Alcorn. A few years ago, there was talk about maybe contracting out the paramedics. So I wonder if that would be also an option on the table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I assume that was part of the.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we'll take any items for future special meeting agendas. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, good night, everyone.
9:12.